Alright everybody, welcome back, and welcome to what is indubitably the star of the update, and a much needed one at that, the J-10. As one of the planes that this update was named after, this thing is seeing a lot of hype, and for very good reason. Previously, Chinese top tier was just really sad. Their best vehicle was the J-11A, which is worse than the SE-27SM, and mind you, the SE-27SM already was kind of a struggle bus at top tier. Both of them have the R-77 as their activator homing missile, which already puts them at a disadvantage because the R-77 has massive amounts of drag on those grid fins. So basically once the motor runs out, the missile starts falling out of the air. And that's just one of the downsides they both share. Compared to the SE-27SM, the biggest downside was the fact that it still had the old SPO RWR. Meanwhile, the SU-27SM has the nice modern pastel RWR, which gives it actual digital aircraft readings and just much better situational awareness overall. Sure, it does get a MAWS or missile approach warning system in exchange for this, but the MAWS is actually quite bad and loves going off for random stuff, so it's kind of more of a hindrance than a help in a lot of cases. Combine that with the fact that it has less data link channels than the SE-27SM, so it can't fire as many R-77s at the same time, and the fact that, well, it's still heavier than the SE-27SM, and you're just really not in for a good time. Well, the J-10A comes in and turns all those tables. For the first time since the MiG-29 nerf, the red sides, that's the Soviets and the Chinese, actually have a competitive flight model at top tier. And, more importantly, it also has a much better missile kit. And that's what I'm going to be talking about first, because these PL-12s are actually very, very solid. Now, I would say the AMRAAM is still a bit better than the PL-12, but that's not saying these are bad missiles, and they do have their own advantages. Namely, you've probably noticed these things are much more agile at close range than the AMRAAM is. Now, that's not that big of a deal because most of your shots with these are going to be at targets in your front hemisphere anyways. You're not really going to be doing a ton of, high off-bore sight shots, but having that ability does come in handy sometimes. And the range performance, while it is worse than the AMRAAM, is still solid, and it's a whole lot better than the R-77. And 6 of these is all you need really at top tier. The only planes that can carry more than 6 are the SE-27SM, which just got 8 R-77s this update, and of course the F-15s, which can carry up to 8 AMRAAMs. But if they do that, they don't get any IR missiles, and so many players, myself included, are still going to run 1 or 2 AIM-9Ms along with that. A kit of 6 activator homing missiles and 2 viable IR missiles is all you really need at top tier. And speaking of, I want to talk about the IR missile situation before I get onto the radar in this thing, because it is absolutely comical, and to be honest, it just shows that Gaijin was not thinking whatsoever whenever they did the modules for this thing. Your best IR missiles are stock. The upgraded IR missiles are actually worse than the ones you can get. And let me explain. So when you first unlock the J-10A and you're stock running, you're going to get access to, of course, your 2 activator homing missiles that you get stock now, the PL-12s, but you also get access to 2 PL-5E2s. And these are new missiles that just got out of this update. I'll talk about their stats here in a little bit, but just so you know, they are, all aspect IRCCM missiles, which is standard at top tier now for your stock IR missiles. Basically everything, say for example, the F-15 gets AIM-9Ms. Whatever flavor they have, they're going to get something, right? So this is normal. What is not normal is the fact that your upgraded IR missile is the PL-8. The PL-8 is the Python 3 if you've never used it before. It's basically an AIM-9L on steroids with greater acceleration and pull, but it has the exact same seeker as the AIM-9L. So you're going from an IRCCM missile to a non-IRCCM missile currently. It just makes no sense to actually go ahead and do it. So the only missile mod you need to grind on this thing is going to be for more PL-12s, so you can just completely ignore the IR missiles as of now. Now, what I think happened here is they had originally planned to add the PL-8B, which is the missile this thing would have actually used in real life, which is a Python 3 with IRCCM. And so I think originally the PL-8 modification was supposed to be for PL-8Bs. And for whatever reason, that never happened, and they never fixed it, so this will probably get PL-8Bs at some point, and if you're watching this video in the future and that has happened by now, I fully expect the PL-8B to be better. But just so you know, the PL-5E2 is now 35 Gs, unlike the 30 Gs of the PL-5, C and B before that, and it has FOV IRCCM gate width, like the R-73 and the Magic 2. What this means is that unlike the A9M that uses suspension IRCCM and blinks itself off whenever it sees flares, instead, once this thing locks on, it shrinks the field of view down from its normal field of view all the way down to 0.75 degrees. So that means at close range, it becomes exceedingly difficult to flare. Not impossible, mind you. Planes that have large caliber countermeasures or people that use the proper tech, where you basically get the plane to fly into its own flares. There's some good videos on that on YouTube if you want to check it out later. Can flare. But most people aren't either going to be able to do it in time or they aren't going to notice it in time. And so, it'll ignore flares very, very often, assuming you use it at close range. Longer ranges, all they have to do is pop a flare most of the time, it just dies, just like most other missiles. With that in mind, what these missiles really benefit from is fast acceleration so they can get as close to the plane as quickly as possible. And the PL-5E2 has that. It has very quick acceleration. It doesn't have that close range agility that the R-73 or the Magic II has, although it does at least have better acceleration than the R-73, which means that assuming you're not at super close range, typically it's going to be ignoring flares more often than the R-73 just simply because it gets closer faster. I will say I've really enjoyed using this IR missile on the few chances that I have gotten to, because most of the time you're sitting at radar range. And speaking of, this radar is actually pretty good for ARB, certainly a whole lot better than the SU-27's radar, that's for sure. It does seem to lack a little bit in range. I was having issues getting locks at beyond 50 kilometers, especially in TWS, but in exchange for that, you actually gain some incredible gimbal hemisphere radar. Like, we're talking 85 degrees to either side. This is stuff that we've only seen on the MiG-29 SMT and the like previously. And if you don't know what that means, well, basically you can be almost notching and still guiding your missiles within 5 degrees of the notch, while the enemy is going to have their nose pointed much closer to you if they're going to be able to keep guiding their missile in. That 85 degrees also applies to your HMD, so you can just mouse onto somebody who is almost directly off your wing, lock them up, and just bank in a little bit to fire a PL-12 off. Combine that with the exceptional dogfight and AOA performance that this thing has, and well, you can lock somebody, fire the missile, and then immediately go back into the notch. Speaking of, this thing is absolutely incredible at a dogfight. I would recommend going and checking out Willy Walrus's duel video if you want to see the precise matchups, but essentially, it can beat most things in a dogfight at top tier. The only planes it really loses to are the F-16A Block 10 and the Gripen, and that is only if they're flown very well and kind of passively, maintaining their speed, rate fighting, that sort of thing. So if you're both going aggressive, the J-10 has a very, very good chance of winning. Unfortunately, that is where the couple major downsides of the J-10 come in. The only major downside, in my opinion, is the gun. This thing unfortunately gets the Gish-23, and no, it doesn't have that 6-barrel Gish-23 that you see on the SU-24 with the insane fire rate. It's the normal one that you find on stuff like the MiG-21 BIS. The biggest thing, of course, that you get very, very poor muzzle velocity. It also has relatively poor ammo capacity. So this means that you get poor trigger time to go with the difficult to aim gun, which is a great combo, and the damage is not nearly what it used to be. Now, the other downside, like I said, is less of a big deal, and that's the fact that it only gets 72 countermeasures, which is kind of low for current top tier. Now, it does actually get more pops than the American F-16C, because it gets 72 individual pops of countermeasures. Meanwhile, the F-16C has 120 countermeasures, but they drop in pairs. They are also actually large caliber countermeasures, so at least against non-IRCCM missiles and to an extent gate width missiles like the R-73 and the like, they are more effective than normal countermeasures. But when you're fighting F-15s that have 240 countermeasures and Gripens that have 700, and when you're having to bring enough chaff to deal with the dozens of radar missiles that may be thrown at you in a match, plus trying to maintain enough flares to deal with all the IRCCM missiles that come later as well, you can see where only having 72 could be an issue. Personally, I wound up running around 40-ish flares and 32 chaff, and playing a little bit more passively at the beginning of the game, as you can see right here, but more chaff may be needed, honestly, because the meta is firmly in the hands of active radar hung missiles right now. The final thing I actually wanted to talk about was its ability as a multi-role aircraft, because it technically does have some ability as such. Now, this thing would not be my first pick, nor my second pick for use as casting ground RB, but it does have a limited ability if you want to do so. It gains access to a whopping 2 GBUs, which are definitely what I would choose. It also gains some GPS bombs and the glide bombs, which you see me using in the background, and keep an eye on that. But meanwhile, the JH7 can use 6 GBUs. It also gets access to the KH-29T, which is a fire and forget air-to-ground missile, which you can use against SAMs and the like. So definitely that would be my first choice, and honestly, I would take the F-16 MLU with 6 Mavericks over this thing as well. Now, if you're looking for a vehicle which both has a fighter spawn point cost, and so it does not go into the pool that the JH7 does, and you want something that has active radar homing missiles to use against, other CAS and ground RB, then I could see this thing maybe being worth it as like a second spawn option. But if you're just looking for CAS, do not go for this thing. Definitely get the JH7. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. Are you guys excited to play this thing as I was? Subscribe if you haven't already, and hope you all have a great day. So, peace, y'all.